Hey, what's up, guys? Multiplying leaders is essential to see a multiplying movement. Today, we're going to revisit the 139 tool and talk about how to actually use that in seeing multiplying leaders. That is coming up. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Multiplying Disciples channel. My name is Mark, and as always, if you're new on the channel, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification, and also like this video. All of that helps to get this farther out there. You know the YouTube algorithm. It also helps you to see this content, and more, we're posting this in other places, so check out that link description below to find this content. As censorship increases, we want to have this diversified so that you can still find this online, so make sure you check that out. Okay, so in this video, I want to revisit that tool that I introduced to you in recent content called 139. Now, 139, if you haven't checked it out, please check out those videos that introduces the idea. And this comes about as you read, especially in Mark 1 through 4, how Jesus found his multiplying apostolic leaders. To see a multiplying movement, you've got to have multiplying leaders with the right DNA and investing them in such a way that they will multiply that generationally, that particular DNA. So check that out for how it is that Jesus found these leaders. But I want to talk about the tool itself. How do you use the 139 tool to begin to multiply leaders in your context? Now, in general, here's why you need this tool. If you've ever seen a generational church map where there are churches that are multiplying churches, it looks like there's all this activity happening. It looks like all these churches are multiplying. Sometimes when you're looking at this on paper, it looks more clean and put together than in real life. It's oftentimes more messy, but there's also oftentimes more happening than what you see on paper. So with that in mind, I want to just point out this fact that when you see a generational map with churches that are multiplying, the line between those churches are leaders. A church multiplying to a new context or into a new church, the lines that connect those multiplication are the leaders. So to the degree that you have got healthy multiplying leaders is the degree to which you're going to see a multiplying network of churches and disciples. So leadership development is essential, and you can't have your hands in connected with multiplying generations way far down the line or way far geographically spread out from you. It's just not possible. In fact, it's not healthy or wise. Jesus is the multiplying discipleship leader, and he is the disciple maker. We want to point back to him. It's good that we have that limitation. So how then do we use the 139 to see this kind of multiplication? First of all, you want to say that 139 is not primarily just a discipleship tool. It's a leadership development tool. It's a way of pointing towards what it means to be a multiplying leader. And as Chuck Wood has said, and I think this is a really helpful way to say it, it's a soil sample. So if you've ever seen when you're out and you're wanting to begin to work in a new field, you want to check to see what is the quality of this soil that I'm about to plant in. So you would take a soil sample. And so you're going to go in a small area, a small size around, you're going to go deep down and find out what's the quality of that soil. So with the 139, this is your soil sample of what's happening as you begin to multiply disciples, churches, and leaders. So that's this idea of saying if the DNA is healthy and it's multiplying from 1 to 3, if you've got the right DNA, and then 3 to 9, and then you're challenging those 3 to use the same tool of 139, that DNA that is healthy and multiplying is going to pass downstream, and those lines connecting those generational churches on that map are going to be healthy and continue to multiply. So 139 at its core is a leadership development tool. And as leaders begin to emerge, as you are sharing the gospel, as you are beginning to train, you're going to begin to find those that are not only faithful, available, teachable, remember this acronym, faithful, available, teachable, but also reproducing. So that R on the FATR is critical. This is where you begin to find those leaders. It's a given that you're going to find faithful, available, teachable in leaders, right? But reproducing is absolutely key and critical. In fact, Jesus gathered with his disciples in John 15 in the upper room. And these are not just any disciples, but these are the leaders that he has pulled out from the crowd to invest deeply into. And he says this to them. He says, if you begin to bear fruit, my Father will prune you so that you bear more fruit. So the process of leadership development is identifying those that are going to be reproducing fruitfully and then helping them respond to the Holy Spirit's pruning within them so that they will be bearing more multiplying fruit. So 139 is assuming, first of all, that you've found those leaders. These are those that are faithful, available, teachable, and reproducing. And then now this is going to begin to be useful for you as you are identifying what DNA should be passed along and challenging them to find the fruitful few in their own ministry. So Jesus says that the Father is going to come and prune us. He's going to prune away not just the bad growth, but the good things that are not fruit bearing. So as you're developing leaders, you need to help them to identify what is it that might be good that's happening in their heart or in their ministry or life, but is not fruit bearing. And how do they begin to focus on the most important pieces of DNA in their life and in their disciples' life so that it bears much fruit. So 139 is focused on what is the DNA of the 3, and then what is the DNA that's getting passed down to the 9. So DNA is one big piece of 139, and you can begin to ask questions like, hey, if I ask your 3 to your 3, and then you're talking about the 9, if I ask them to share with me the vision that you have cast, would they be able to share that vision with me? And the answer to that question, and also what tools are they confident and competent in that they could train somebody else, when you begin to ask those kinds of questions downstream to your 3 about the 9, your 9, their 3, that begins to give you information about how healthy this DNA is passing along downstream. So 139 is a very shorthand way of saying, is the DNA multiplying, and do you have 3 that you're pouring deeply into that are faithful, available, teachable, reproducing? So when we say 139, that doesn't mean that you have to restrict specifically to those numbers. Jesus obviously had 12. So Jesus had 1, 12, and then on multiplying from there, right? So it's not saying that you have to only find 3. It's not limiting to that number, but it is highlighting this idea of pouring deeply into the few that pour deeply into a few more. So one other piece of why using 139 is so effective, or how to use this effective in multiplying leaders, is to simply begin to include that question in your leadership development. So learn this from Chuck. Thank you, Chuck, for highlighting this to me, and from others that Chuck has trained. But by just asking that question, how are your 3 doing? And then how are their 3 doing, 139, it begins to cause us in a very good way to be challenged to find those 3 and to challenge our 3 to find 3 more. By simply regularly asking this question when we meet with our leaders, how are your 3 and how are their 3? At first, they're going to say, I don't have the 3 or I don't have the 9. And continuing to ask the question is a loving thing to do and not a heavy thing to do. It might feel heavy at first, but really it's a loving way of saying, this is what God calls us to be as fruitful, multiplying leaders. And so begin to ask God for that fruitful next generation of fruit, for that 3 to become 9, and for that 9 to become 27, and for that to multiply onward, to begin to ask for that. So just showing them an empty 139 with empty bubbles on it will begin to cause your leaders to think through, what will it take? What's it going to take to multiply to the next generation? And that uncertainty and that question is really good, because it forces them to begin to ask internal questions and questions of what's happening already in their leaders, to begin to see that DNA multiply onto the next generation. So 139 is a regular part of your leadership development questions that you're asking your leaders will be effective to help them not only feel challenged to multiply to the next generation, but also what DNA is going to be effective at healthy duplication to the next generation and beyond. So I hope that's helpful as a way to revisit 139, and specifically in a practical way that you can use this as God begins to bring you those leaders so that you can see that multiply to the next generation. Begin to include that in your weekly questions with those leaders and ask them if they're using that with their leaders. And as that begins to multiply downstream, you're going to get that soil sample with leaders that proves and shows healthy reproducing DNA downstream in multiplication. Hope that's helpful. I will see you guys next time.